Pranay, for your comments. We have time now for a discussion, and I'll invite anybody who's interested, would like to make a comment on any of the presentations, please raise your hands. Okay, I'll give you some more time, but I'll take a little time to make some comments of my own. I found the first presentation by young Ms. Okeacha quite interesting because this new agreement is very recent. It's it entered into force only a month ago, I think. And I think at the last count I had, only Eritrea remains out of it. I think Nigeria joined it. I think Nigeria had reservations. They were worried about the impact on the domestic industry. And so they are still looking at it, but I think they'll stay. The issues are loss of customs revenue. Many governments, especially small, with less budgets, they would lose customs revenue. There are logistic problems. Tariffs is only one aspect of trade. The logistics, the transportation networks, they also add to the final landed cost of goods. That's a problem we are familiar with in our part of the world as well. And that's where the North has had a tremendous advantage. Over the last decades, they have built up their whole logistics network. They have been able to deliver the goods at low cost at all the key ports and develop their distribution channels. So it's a formidable competition. We ourselves have tried to compete with northern producers in several markets, and we know that it's a very, very difficult process to overcome and compete with these established trading channels. Question is whether the new agreement will stimulate FDI and business growth in Africa. Will companies come and set up business and take advantage of the new agreement? This will depend on the competitive business environment offered by different countries. They will probably go to countries which offer the better facilities. We'll have to see, because this is a huge region which is going in for a free trade agreement, and it's going to be very interesting to watch how it evolves. The next presentation was on the trade with Latin America. I agree, and we know this problem. India-Latin America trade has been low, far below the full potential. It's localized into a few commodities and a few countries. It's not diversified, it's not deepened. And this is in the hands of our business. Our businessmen have to go and find the trade opportunities. Government can support it. I think we are also looking at going beyond the trade and tariff agreements. We now have a kind of, we started with trade and investment agreements. Now we got something called the Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement. There we are trying to liberalize trade not only in goods, in services, in financial flows, and of course a lot of other things which relate to development are included in this CECA. It's a kind of Mark II trade agreement. With the European Union, there have been a problem in going to more ambitious trade agreements because they want to bring in certain human rights issues. But anyway, I think a study of these more elaborate trade agreements would be interesting from the point of view of agreements between southern partners, whether they could enlarge the scope of the trade agreements. The IORA presentation was very interesting. Since we as a country, we are part of this, no doubt renewable energy is very, very important, and it's now within our reach. Some countries are already going to zero carbon by 2050, but I think with the Solar Alliance, if it really works and provides a platform for renewable energy technology and finance to flow, that would be a great help. I want to throw one point out which is not connected with this. When we talk about the Indian Ocean, there are large marine environments. The world is divided into 66 marine environments, large marine environments, and the Indian Ocean, at least as far as India is concerned, has number 32, which is the Arabian Sea, and 34, which is the Bay of Bengal. The idea is that the countries which are in part of this large marine environment will collectively manage the marine diversity so that the seas do not disappear, life doesn't disappear. Now, as far as the Indian Ocean is concerned, nothing has been done. Gulf of Guinea and other marine environments, there have been projects funded by the GEF. So this is something which may be of interest to the IOR countries, that how do we protect the Indian Ocean? In a sense, the countries there are the custodians of marine life there. You might be aware that right now in New York, there is a big third session of the UN conference on marine biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. This is the third session which is going on. They are supposed to draft a treaty which will protect biodiversity beyond the national jurisdiction. That means the open seas. So that is going to be a very important treaty because it will cover all marine life in a large percentage of the ocean space. My look at what has happened in the last 3 sessions shows that southern countries are very, very poorly prepared for this. Most of the work and initiatives are coming from Scandinavian countries and the north. But there are very few countries of the south which are actively pushing what should be their interests in the whole conference. Let's hope it comes out with a treaty which will not be unbalanced. Yes, the regulatory agenda for vaccines, which was mentioned by Ms. Lozado, it just occurred to me that this is very interesting because it uses data analytics software to analyze the text of regulations. And it just struck me that this approach might apply to other types of agreement as well. It's the first time I've come across a case where data analytics softwares have been used and this kind of maps and all have been provided. I found it quite interesting. Could have wider applications. As far as the regulatory systems are concerned, there are a lot of things which are coming out because of genomics. There are medical devices, again there's the issue of regulating that. Then a lot of biopharmaceuticals and products coming out of genetically modified organisms. The whole regulatory system for that is still, in many places, it's still confused. Yes, our friend from Cuba, Ricardo, has come out with a very rich presentation with a lot of material. It's a problem that neglected tropical diseases, the large pharmaceutical companies don't want to work on it because they don't see much profit in it. So we have come across a new initiative called the Health Impact Foundation. The Health Impact Fund is designed to fund producers of products according to the impact on health. So if you produce a vaccine which, say, cures malaria, then you will get a funding proportionate to how much money has been saved by preventing that malaria. So this is a way by which R&D in pharma and producers will be encouraged to work on diseases like malaria, meningitis, and diseases which are found in the south but not in the north. The question is whether this fund or this approach will, because the classic approach depends on the profits. Pharmaceutical industries spend money and they recover the money through profits, and that results in the high price of products. And that has been a problem. The products are not affordable. So this approach is pioneered, and RIS is involved in that, in some discussion on this. We'll have to see how it works out. And the Cuban example of health diplomacy is very interesting. They are one of the quick responders for any kind of medical emergency. You might remember the Ebola epidemic outbreak. They were one of the first to send a medical team on the spot. And in fact, one of their medical workers did fall victim to the disease as well. I think I will just stop there because I have also used 10 minutes. Thank you. So I hope by now you have some more interventions from the floor? Yes.
On a few issues who worked on the African Continental Free Trade Area. This pact has immense potential. And if you look at it, from the possibilities of expanding trade, the possibilities of increasing connectivity, the potential is immense. But I just want to pick out, a few challenges and maybe obstacles that are coming our way. One, I think the paper highlighted a bit of infrastructure financing, infrastructure, and that comes along with a big aspect of financing. And then, of course, we had, of course, corporations from our good friends from China who have been investing a lot along the project of the Belt and Road Initiative. So the fundamental question then is, how that financing becomes sustainable in the long run, and how the strategies are in place to pay back these huge amounts of loans. The case scenarios already comes out in Kenya, where the standard gauge railway that is supposed to be constructed from Mombasa to connect to Uganda and Sudan and other countries has come to a halt, because Kenya is saying that we can't keep financing because these loans are very expensive for us, and the other countries that are supposed to pick it up are not willing to make the cost. They're supposed to do a cost sharing aspect, and they're not willing to do that investment in that regard. So I don't know whether my colleague did some bit of that. I would be happy to have your thoughts on that. Then secondly, there's a very big security question in Africa. And so when I talk about trade in a continent that has, for example, if you look at DR Congo, which is wholesomely not under the control of the state, and many other countries that have made significant progress. I was wondering if you have thought about it, and if you see there are visible ways on which we can navigate this, because other than just security, which I mean the active militia groups, we also have a bit of terrorist acts, and some of them have come up in a big way because of for example, the Al-Shabaab in the Horn of Africa. So I think the African Continental Free Trade Area would demand a lot of free borders, free movement of people, and then this comes then with the security question. So I was just wondering, if you probably thought about this and if you have any suggestions. And then finally, and this comes from a global context, there has been a huge rise of populism in the whole world. Of course, it is more pronounced in Europe, but it is also emerging in Africa. And there are many voices that are arguing for what I would call not very backed up, reforms. And these policies then, come down to impact national policy and planning. But besides that, there is a general trend to fall back from multilateral institutions, which is just not prevalent in Africa. It's widespread. So I'm just trying to look at in the context of the global events happening in the world, and I am wondering what do you think? What would be the core motivation of AFTA in the context that multilateralism seems to be falling apart, and they're rising very sharp voices, populist voices, which are actually urging against these institutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Let's give the presenters a chance to respond. Any of them would like to react to the comments? Yeah? Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to react to Mr. Sinha's comments on regional infrastructure and the connection to capacity building. I think yeah. Okay, I want to first of all say that infrastructure is a big challenge to intra-trade in Africa, and it calls for attention by African governments. Then concerning the connection to the pillars of development pillars, I think it's more of a trade facilitation issue and not a capacity building issue. So the essence of the infrastructure is to facilitate trade in the region. I don't know if I addressed that. Okay, thank you. Mr. Patrick, you raised very important, issues. First of all, you said that AFTA has huge potential for African economy, which is true, but it's faced with a lot of challenges. One, the infrastructure financing. In my paper, the African Development Bank, estimated a very huge amount for infrastructure financing for after to be, achieved. Well, that is a research statement, but the bigger issue is the commitment of African governments to really take up this challenge. When I was making my presentation, I said something about the African leaders' political ambition, the mismatch between their selfish ambition and the economic realities the region is facing. It's really a big issue because if they show commitment to this, I think they can achieve it. But whereby they didn't show any commitment, I'm afraid if after will be, achieved. So that is one. Another. Okay, I also want to say that cooperation is the answer to these issues. Even in terms of security, yes, AFTA is going to, liberalize the area in terms of free movement and of goods and even humans. And Africa has a very big challenge when it comes to security. Nigeria, for instance, we are having big challenge of the Boko Haram people. In fact, they are encroaching the east in form of Fulani herdsmen, because they are taking another name. We still believe that they are the same people. So this is a big challenge. In Kenya, the Shabab or something, they are also there. So it's going to be a very big challenge, but it calls for commitment and it calls for serious commitment. If African leaders wish to achieve this, I think it's possible. So that's my take on that.
Thank you. Any other panelists? Yes.
I would just like to say thanks, Ms. Maria, for your question on renewable energy. Yes, Seychelles, they do actually have a specific Seychelles sustainability strategy, which is actually developed from 2012 to 2020, and it is aimed at investment in energy infrastructure and clean renewable energy. So the countries which are investing in Seychelles is France, Japan, UK, and Germany. And mostly they focus on solar energy. On the main island, Mahe, I know there's a big project going on, focusing on installing a lot of solar panels throughout to reduce the consumption of other uses they have. And I would also like to thank Ambassador for the question or mentioning marine biodiversity, which is very important. I'm not from the Blue Economy team, but just to mention, we have the third Blue Economy Ministerial coming up in the first week of September, and that would be hosted in Bangladesh. I'll convey to the team to focus on this issue as well. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you. Next, anybody else?
Thank you. I'm going to mention another challenge in Africa. We have a geopolitical conflict in some countries in Africa. You know, geopolitics is an issue, is a big issue in most of the East African countries. I can mention that we have Burundi is my country, Rwanda is another country, but the relationship between these countries are not good because of what? Because of this kind of geopolitical conflict. It means that we have problems of ethnic groups. These are also it's a big issue in these countries. So also if you go in Uganda, in Rwanda, it's a big issue because of those problems that we are facing as geopolitical conflict. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. I think we're seeing enough of that in the news these days. It's not there. It's there in Sudan. It's in many places.
Yes. Well, I would like to respond to Maria's question about intellectual property, which is a big topic. Well, in my paper, I'm not addressing that issue, but I know from my country, especially especially with biosimilars, this is an important topic because many let's say innovative products are now, the patents are now expiring, and in that next 10 to 20 years, many of the blockbuster drugs will end. The patents of blockbuster drugs are coming to an end, and but what happened is that the big pharma, this means a big opportunity for our countries because it means that we can replicate, let's say, or we can generate our own technologies to not copy but to generate molecules alike. But the thing is that pharmaceuticals and big companies are trying to protect as much as they can, even protection of clinical data and things like that. And of course, for example, in the case of Peru, what happened is that they even went to the tribunals and had legal battles in order to block biosimilars that, of course, are cheaper and are very necessary because most of them are aimed to provide treatment for diseases such as cancer or diabetes. So this is something important, and I think it's an opportunity to put first health, because health is not like any business. I mean, for any business, a patent it's okay, but for health and for access to medicines, this is a human right and needs to be considered. And well, I know that the Pacific Alliance also has a technical group for intellectual property. They are also discussing about intellectual property for biologics. So, but I'm not very familiarized with what are the specific actions that they're taking now. And well, then I also would like to thank to Mr. Balak for your comment. Yes, of course, as part of looking new opportunities to progress our cooperation, it's necessary to have this kind of, to use and implement this kind of strategies to analyze and to evaluate, do a strategic assessment of our documents, our regulations, and have like an approach not only to respond and to wait until we need the regulation, but to be more proactive and to be able to implement what is necessary. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, the three comments, in fact, are very well connected. The intellectual property, how to identify if an example like this one could be identified as so collaboration, and also the profit. The three aspects, in my point of view, are connected. Why? In current times, if a country or a company decide to invest in biopharmaceutical industry, it's very important to take in consideration the GMP conditions under you're going to produce. The quality control system, the quality assurance system is crucial to do that, because if you don't have the GMP conditions in your facilities, and not only the facilities, also all the chain to send the products, the cold chain, etc. If you don't have these conditions ready, then it's impossible to commercialize those products or to send to UNICEF or to any country. In this schedule, it's very important then to take in consideration the intellectual property. We are talking about two types of products. Biogenerics, products that maybe don't have any patent, that are open because in any moment of the life, the patent that those products had expired, or an innovative product that under the process of research and development was possible to demonstrate that is a product that is unique. And then all the structure was created in order that the biopharmaceutical industry could apply with their own patents, even in the US Office of Patents, in Europe, in China, in any country of the world. But the most important is to understand that in the case of the Cuban biopharmaceutical industry, the people are aware that they need to follow the guidelines created by World Health Organization and by the Global Organization for Commerce. So means that it's not a big issue, it's not a big problem, the topic of intellectual property, because we are aware of that. And in the case of this type of project, you need to be in touch with everyone in the country where you're going to work, or with the regulatory authorities. In the specific case of the agreement with Biomanguinhos to produce vaccines for African countries, it's very important to know, maybe due to the time I didn't explain this part, but it's important to understand that once the biopharmaceutical industry, the big pharma, decided not to produce this vaccine, the cost of the price of the vaccine that they decided to implement was around $80 per vaccine. This is a very high product. It's impossible for UNICEF, it's impossible for African countries, for developing countries, to pay $80 per vaccine. What Brazilian company Biomanguinhos and Finland Institute did was to create the conditions under GMP to produce the same vaccine that didn't have a patent at that moment, because it was a product that was produced by many people, not only for us. Chinese companies also produced this vaccine. Other producers here in India had the capacity for produce the vaccine. So it was not a case where you need to demonstrate the intellectual property, because it was open. It was like a generic. It was not necessary. But take it in consideration the problem at that moment. Both institutions decided to create the conditions in a fast-track project supported not only by the governments, because of course the government had a very important responsibility. Also, both regulatory authorities in Cuba and in Brazil regulatory authorities that are recognized by World Health Organization, were included in the project. It means that it was created during 6-7 months, a technical committee between the two countries with specialists from the ANVISA, the regulatory authority of Brazil, SECMED, the regulatory authority of Cuba, and both regulatory authorities with the government decided to follow up the project in a fast-track project. Why fast-track? Because you may know that in order to do this type of project, sometimes you need at least 1 year to do that. But if you wait 1 year, in the African countries will die thousands of people, mainly children. That's why in 7 months, both countries, both regulatory authorities, both industries decided to work together in a very important work. And the price of this vaccine, the price of this vaccine was the same price of those vaccines that the big pharma decided not to produce more. We are talking around $2 per vaccine. You could see the difference. $2 against $80. And who will pay that? Not the African countries. It was UNICEF, it was the World Health Organization with the donors, the international donors, who paid this quantity because, of course, it could not be free because if it were free, it would not be possible to produce. But you could see the difference in the philosophy of both cases. That's why we consider that with the participation of both governments, the participation of World Health Organization, the regulatory authorities, UNICEF, and also the governments of those countries that were informed about the program, about the project that was implemented by Brazil and Cuba. At that time, World Health Organization declared officially by them, not by Brazil, not by Cuba, World Health Organization declared in an official meeting in Geneva that that was the first time in the history that two developing countries were agreed to work in order to support other countries with low incomes. And then we arrived to the profit, because which profit you could see in high quantities if you produce a vaccine which costs is $2, and the difference with the most expensive vaccines produced by other companies is $80. And you need to take in consideration that it's not only to produce the vaccine, it's also to demonstrate that this product, this vaccine, is available, is ready to immunize children that could be sick or not. And also you need to export the vaccine. All those need money. So it was not a project where we could see that had any type of profit. And in the same way, there are other examples. We always like to explain this example because it was the first. But I could tell to you that since 2007, similar projects have been conducted, for example, with Vietnam, for example, with Iran, for example, with other developing countries in order to supply, sometimes in a joint collaboration, sometimes the Cuban biopharmaceutical industry alone. But the most important topic is the philosophy. How to conduct, how to follow up this type of project in order that could be available, in order that could be useful for the people, and not to see this type of projects as a business, because we are living in a world where health and medicaments is a business. it's not possible to see like this. It's the truth. Today, there are many people that use the medicaments as a business. But in fact, we are talking about a human right, the health. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, I think there are many of us who feel that health should not be a business, not only in drugs and pharmaceuticals, but even the cost of health treatment. Anyhow, so this is the first batch of papers for this Young Scholars Forum. It's a new enterprise. We are launching it at RIS. If you have any ideas on how, yes, please. Yeah, please.
Sir.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Balakrishnan. I would like to compliment DG RIS Sachin Chaturvedi and his team who thought of having a Young Scholars Forum. And in the very first, as he has also said, that we have got excellent papers. And whosoever did whatever you call it, screening or otherwise, but yes, a great job has been done. Some of the issues which have been raised today, one is on trade-related areas. As Queenith had started, and she mentioned that one section of the government wants that revenue should not be foregone. So this thing, it's not new. We have been seeing it. People generally say that Frederick List had said so, that infant industry argument. It had in fact come prior to him by Hamilton in 1790 and till today. But one thing, at times the revenue authorities forget that if there is higher economic activity in the country due to trade, in the next periods there will be higher revenue, because you recover more money even if tariff rates are lower or zero. And in any case, these are not going to be zero for all the countries. These are zero only for the countries with which. So I think the cooperation and then infra part also has been, it's an excellent achievement that a country could move forward. I come to Maria, the Uruguay, and again, at times these days countries talk in terms of what's my bilateral trade with this country is negative or adverse like that. So, and it's a beautiful example that yes, bilateral trades are not balancing one-to-one. But one big plus thing which has come from your paper is that something like what we call in economics depth of distance. If India and Latin America, because if you go to gravity model and distance coming in denominator with a negative power of say -2 or something like that. So here it shows that maybe the transport costs are going down or whatever reasons. It's becoming quite beneficial to go ahead with trade. So that's a good, and again the localization part of the SDGs, the way trade can help cooperate, and the similar comment was made by Pranay, and Maria sitting over there had also made similar comments. I think in the case of Mauritius, as Smith had said that Seychelles taken together, the kind of gains which are coming, and one can learn, other countries can learn a lot from how well these things can happen. All the more when there is a lot of apprehension when sea waters are going to rise, what are the gains from global water ecosystems? That was a very plus point on it. I'm highly impressed by what Jean-Claude said. Especially he not only mentioned that there are challenges of like food security, etc., but he also he has listed in which areas we can go in for trainings. So it's not training within the country. It's training across South-South, so that will add a lot. I would like to just club what has been said on pharma again. One thing which, in the case of Cuba, the way you rushed in case of emergencies and at the cost of one life also. Of course, in WTO also there are exemptions when it's a question of saving lives. But then the kind of effort which goes into producing a medicine, it's fine, but at the time of, say, you were giving an example of $2 versus $80. So I think one thing the profit-making companies should realize that if as demand is going up, in any case they should have reduced the prices. If there's a big demand or there's an epidemic, I'm not saying out of benevolence, but because of the, say, economies of scale itself, price should have gone down. Secondly, if something is worth, it costs, say, only $2, you're trying to extract consumer surplus by raising it to, say, 80. Even if you reduce it to, say, 20 or 25, there will be lesser incentive for fake medicines. Because when there is too much of margin that if somebody can produce in $2 or less, because he need not spend even $2. If somebody can produce in half a dollar because he's producing a fake medicine. So it's in the interest of the companies to keep at bay spurious drugs, that they see that prices are not that high. So at the end, I would like to compliment that the way and the only thought which came to my mind after hearing all of you was that why we waited till Delhi 5 for this Young Scholars Forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes.
Oh, thank you. Dr. Anand just elaborated everything, and I also join him in congratulating to our young scholars for their beautiful presentations. Let me say this is a good beginning. To my mind, the problem of South-South cooperation, particularly the pharmaceutical industries, the problem is the trip, I mean patent right and other kind of things. What the problem is there, and therefore we are not very much going ahead with that kind of collaborations. But I think, to my mind, the traditional knowledge available with the countries, every countries have some traditional knowledge about the medicines. Either it is India or China or Japan or any other country, African country even. Every country has some traditional knowledge, and which is not, I don't think it is affected by the patent right or something like that. We can, the South countries can certainly collaborate on the traditional knowledge platform. That will not, come in the way of your patent right or any other kind of things. And we must exchange our knowledge. That should be our way forward. Out of all the discussions, the patent knowledge, traditional knowledge available with us, with each and every country, that will be much beneficial for, coming only on the part of the health side. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have just gone past 7 o'clock. 1 minute. Okay. Okay, while you're saying, I will just say a few things. I think this has been a very nice session. How the YSF will go in future, I don't know, but I'm sure that RIS will have on the website whatever the Young Scholars Forum is doing. What is sure is that the next Delhi process, a similar event will be there. There will be a call for papers, and all of you can participate who have been the ITech scholars and have the opportunity to participate. So this will, Professor Milindo will hopefully get his 200 or 300 papers, which he'll have to read and go through. But I'm sure that based on your suggestions, if you want to send a research paper at any other time, not necessarily for the forum, but for publication or consideration, I'm sure there will be a way open for that. The whole project is still evolving. Keep an eye on the website for details. Okay.
My name is Dr. Kawar. I'm talking about, we talked about pharmaceuticals, we talked about vaccine and all. What about the life-saving medicines, the unlicensed life-saving medicine, the medicine which may not available in African countries? What is the role of South-South cooperation? How we can procure or save many, many lives? I hope you're getting me what I'm saying.
Can you give an example of an unlicensed life-saving medicine?
Means there are many medicines which may not available in that region. How to procure it? Maybe it's oncology, it's a hematology, it's a transplant. How to save someone's life which is not available? How to procure? What is, I hope you...
Sorry, do you mean as individuals, as companies, as country? When you say how to procure, as a country, as a company, or as individual?
I'm not talking about company, I'm talking about the drug. Suppose someone has a blood cancer and that medicine is not available in that region. How to procure to save his life?
Look, this is very rare diseases, right? An individual who I think the best thing is to go there for the treatment. For example, in Cuba, they have some treatment for vitiligo. We have Indians who go there for the treatment. So I think the quickest solution is for the concerned person to go to that country where that medicine has been in use and they have the experience of treating such cases. Do it.
But in many cases, the drug is not available. It is very difficult without drug to treat a patient.
The register. Because you must to know if this medicament is registered in your country. If it's not registered, it's not possible, it's not available. Then you need to go to this place where it's registered and buy. Or prepare some agreement in order to do any transfer, etc. There are many ways. Okay. There are many ways.
For example, if you are suffering from a terminal illness and you want to put an end to your life, you can't do it anywhere, but you can find a country where you can do it. I mean, these are things which happen.
Sir, even in India, there are many medicines are not available. So here the DCGI, the Drug Control General of India, they play a vital role. They procure a drug, they procure a drug on the named patient supply, not to institute, not to private hospital or corporate hospital. They can procure on the named patient.
True.
It's true. Cure the drug, but the drug is only one part of the treatment. No?
Yes.
They have to administer it, somebody who knows the drug, the side effects, and what are the ways of administration. It's not just you get the drug and you take it. I mean, that's only one part. Huh?
Thank you.
It's not a pen.
Okay, I think we'll adjourn for, I use the word adjourn because you're going to have a session tomorrow also. So let's adjourn for dinner and thank you.
Oh, yeah, group photo.